So yeah.
So, you know,
What?
it's a very intrusive sound.
That'd be ridiculous. Come on, Sonny, be natural. Okay, so we missed the motivation. Never mind. Doesn't matter. Oh, there's my water. Thank you so much. Okay. Okay, so that's why we're here, thinking like that. That'll do for our motivation. No, more than that. Why we're doing this, we're listening so we can apply all this, but why? Well, one, to help us put ourselves together, be less neurotic, less confused, more confident, more relaxed, more content, and therefore more compassionate and more empathetic, because that's what comes, you know. So it'll be for our sake and for the sake of others, because we live in this crazy world together, don't we? So that's thinking like that. That's our reason for being together. So yeah, the few weeks, the last month, I think it was, wasn't it? Was it? When was I here? Last month? November, wasn't it? And part of December, yeah. We talked about karma. We obviously other things come into it. So we'll start with this and we'll see where it all goes. I think I've said this many times, and I think it's true that in the world, people who say they like being Buddhist or they like Buddhism, I think probably the vast majority don't really think much about karma. You know, it just seems like an interesting Buddhist idea, but it doesn't seem very relevant, and it doesn't seem, well, why would I bother thinking about it? Which is a really interesting point, you know. So the reason to think about it, I mean, you know, like I always say, if we, you know, if we can discover, if we can prove that the Buddha is mistaken in his observation, that our mind is not physical, that it's not the handiwork of a creator, that it's not the handiwork of our parents. Our brain is, yep, but not the consciousness, not the thoughts and feelings and emotions. That's the mind. They're not the handiwork of anyone else. It's a key fundamental point in Buddhism. So if we can prove that this is wrong, we can prove that it's a mistake, that Buddha's wrong in his assessment, in his observation, then the whole of the Buddhist view of the world would collapse into a heap of incoherent nonsense. Because it's sometimes a surprise to us when we think of a spiritual path, that it's actually a worldview. I mean, Buddhism is a worldview, you know, it's studied in depth in the monastic university system in Tibet, coming from India, of course, the great Nalanda tradition, as His Holiness tells us often enough. So it's totally necessary if you really want to think, you know, be a Buddhist and take, you know, jump in the deep end and full-fledged Buddhist, then karma is absolutely fundamental to understand. And the more we understand it, it's not just some kind of interesting idea, who cares, it's actually the basis of our practice. It's the absolute basis of our practice. And it's not complicated, because the Buddha's telling us, with the view of karma, the Buddha's telling us that everything we think and do and say is the process of, quote unquote, creating karma, of doing actions. Everything we think and do and say, the analogy the Buddha uses, leaves seeds in our mind, which necessarily being seeds will produce our future experiences. So as His Holiness would say, you could say that the law of karma is actually like self-creation. So when we realize that, in other words, we create ourselves, and everything we think and do and say is the process of our becoming who we become in the future, then we'll understand it's fundamental and necessary to understand it. Because, you know, the Buddha is telling us, the word Buddha, I always quote this, the word Buddha, the etymology of it is very delicious. It's very simple. Bud implies the eradication of all the delusions from the mind, and da implies the development to perfection in the mind of all the goodness and virtue. So that's the end. If that's the end result of being a Buddhist, then the job of being a Buddhist is to lessen the delusions and grow the goodness. So then when you die, these, you know, the goal is Buddhahood. 99% of us on the planet right now won't achieve that in this life. And the Buddha would tell us that our consciousness, which is not the handiwork of mummy, daddy, or a creator, and is certainly not the product of nothing, it has to have causes. So the causes of this mind is the previous moment. So if you track your mind back to the first second of conception, the only choice you've got taking this view is that the cause of your consciousness joining that egg and sperm of your mummy and daddy is the previous moment of that consciousness. It's got its own momentum. So, the Western view tracks back into the past, looks into our past, but it's the physical past, the past of mother, father, grandma, grandpa, and the monkeys, isn't it? But for the Buddha, the past is in one's own mind, one's own consciousness, which is not physical, and goes back and back. So the concept is not very complicated. It just seems a bit abstract to us. I always remember in these classes we've been having here, someone asked, what's the point of karma? Who cares? And what that indicates is that we have a very strong sense that we're this concrete, self-existent entity somehow plonked on this planet by somebody else. We don't have a feeling that we're this dynamic, moment by moment thing. That's what our mind is, So every second of what our mind does, every second of what our mind does, and then followed through by what the body and speech do on the basis of that mind is the process of producing the person we become. That's the way to say about karma. So it's crucial to understand it, even bare minimum to understand it. So the simple way to understand it, one way of framing the entire Buddhist path is in terms of stopping suffering and getting happy. It's very simple, not complicated. We all want happiness and we all don't want suffering. So that's one way of framing the entire Buddhist path. And that absolutely is the way of framing the law of the concept of karma. So if I don't want future suffering and I do want happiness, then I better know what causes it. So for the Buddha, what causes future suffering, what causes present suffering is past actions, and what causes future suffering is present actions, and what causes present happiness is my past actions, and what causes future happiness is my present actions of body, speech, and mind. That's why the seeds and fruits analogy is really easy. It's a good one. Buddha uses it all the time. If you want a garden, you first have to visualize what you want that garden to contain, and then you better know what seeds to plant. It's not complicated. So the same, if you want happiness, even if it's just the simplest level, there's different levels of suffering and happiness. Buddha talks about in his Four Noble Truths. There's various levels, but even the simplest level, at least happiness meaning nice things happening, pleasant, comfortable body, pleasant friends, people liking us, getting a job easily, money in the bank, delicious food, the simplest level of happiness. Buddha talks way more subtle than that, obviously. In one framework, he even calls ordinary happiness a subtler level of suffering. But forget even that. If you even just have that you want future happiness, you have to create it. But our problem is we think it comes from outside. So we spend all our times manipulating the outside world, thinking if we, that putting money in the bank is the way to be happy, and only doing the external, not thinking of the internal. Nothing wrong with doing the external. The Buddha says that's not the main cause. No way. What you do internally is the main cause of what happens to you, even externally. In other words, having money in the bank is a fruit of generosity. Having people be kind to you, having people speak the truth to you is you're telling the truth. Having people believe your words is you're speaking the truth. So we are the cause. We are the main cause of who we become. It's something that sounds simple. But as Lama Zopa says, and it's very shocking to hear it, but I think if we look at the world and ourselves, we can see it's true. He says the vast majority of humans on this planet actually have no idea that what goes on in their mind, meaning their thoughts, plays any role at all in their lives. I mean, this sounds quite schizophrenic. This sounds quite serious mental illness, but analyze it. It's true. We don't think what goes on in our mind is important. I can think, the fact that we say, I can think what I like, implies that whatever you think doesn't have a result. It's like saying, I can put whatever seeds I like in my garden. Well, of course you can. You're the boss. But seeds bring fruits. So it's obvious if the view of karma is true, that everything you think and then do and say produces your happiness and suffering, you'd better learn to know what seeds to plant. You better learn to know what thoughts and actions will bring happiness. I mean, it's very simple, but we don't think this way. We don't think this way. So what causes happiness? What causes happiness? Even the ordinariest level of happiness, getting nice things, being treated nicely, having happy life, pleasant bodies, you know, and we're talking now as well as the future, is what we do with our body, speech, and mind. This is the meaning of karma. You know. I always quote this, I always say this, and we understand it. We don't join the dots. We know if you want to be a musician in 5 years, guess what? You've got to do the work. You can't just get a piano and look at it. You can't just get a piano teacher and look at them. They're just the external conditions, but you have to internalize musical theories. You're the main cause of becoming a pianist. Well, you are the main cause, Buddha says, of becoming a happy person and a suffering person. That's surprising to us. That's a surprise, because we don't think what goes on in our mind is the main source, and that's Buddha's point. It is. It's simple words, but very shocking to us. Even when we're nice little Buddhists and we're trying our best, we still believe totally that the outside world, we're very addicted to that. It's not being moralistic. Don't give up the outside world. You don't have to. That's not what's being said. You know, that's why we worry so much. We think having money in the future means you've got to put it in the bank. Well, banks go broke, you know. Businesses go broke, people lose their jobs. It is part of it. Absolutely. Don't deny the external. Having health definitely depends upon eating good food, you know, no question. But the Buddha would say, if you're lacking the karmic causes, then no matter how well you eat, you'll always be unhealthy. If you're lacking the karmic causes, if you're lacking the activity, if you're lacking the tendency of generosity, no matter how much money you put in the bank, you won't have enough money. So the internal is always the first cause. So when it comes to karma, then what it is, you know, there's a simple list. There's a simple list at the very beginning of Buddha's teachings. There's a simple little list. He gives us a list of the 10 don'ts. Because he starts off not by saying what seeds to plant. He begins by saying, at least don't plant these seeds. Because the tendency, we're driven by, he's suggesting, we can look at this, we're driven by, you know, the negative actions. This is what causes us suffering. So his first thing is at least stop your grosser level of suffering. And how do you do that? Well, you stop doing certain actions. He's not even discussing the mind yet. He says, well, at least don't kill. Why not, Buddha? Well, killing, there's two things. Killing is defined as a negative action because it harms another. But the real reason he exhorts us not to kill is for our own sake. You don't kill because you'll sow seeds in your mind. You'll sow seeds in your mind with the tendency to kill, which can then produce the result of getting killed, suffering rebirth, continuing to kill, and having various environmental results of it. Because there are 4 karmic results. There are 4 types of results of everything we think and do and say, the Buddha would say. So the bare minimum action is don't kill, don't harm sentient beings. It's the broader one, don't harm sentient beings. And there are 7 actions he at least recommends we refrain from doing to at least stop the major suffering in the future, and for even these to be the cause of having the opposite. So if you want a happy life next, if you want to be even this life even, but forget that, even this next life, because the mind will continue, Buddha says, this is fundamental. So if you want to be born in another decent mother's human womb, as opposed to a dog's womb or an ant egg, he says, well, you better cause it. And how would you do that? Not killing. Refrain from killing. Refrain from killing. If you want, you know, to have nice relationships, then don't cheat. Don't follow your attachment and cheat on your partners and misuse others and you know, like sexual misconduct. Don't take the ungiven. If you want to have reasonable money in the bank next life and be born into a reasonable family where you can have access to things and not be stolen from and get a job when you want it and have credit in the bank and so on, then don't steal. Bare minimum, don't steal. 3 things of your body. Don't kill. The result of that would be another decent human body. People won't kill you, and the food will be very delicious. Don't steal. Means you'll be born in a family where there's at least a reasonable amount of money, and people won't steal from you. And there's also environmental results of all the actions. So these things. So there's 4 kinds of results. One is a type of rebirth, one is a tendency, one is an experience similar to it happening to you, and one is even an environmental result, the physical world impacting upon you. That seems quite abstract, but it's all explained in the teachings, you know. Then you've got 4 of the speech, us clever humans. If you want to be believed in the future, not, you know, or not lied to, then don't speak words that aren't true. If you're only born in a place where you're always hearing angry, horrible sounds, then don't abuse people. If you don't want your relationships to break up all the time, then don't badmouth people behind their backs. You don't want people just to completely devalue your words and think you're just like nothing and nobody, then don't rabbit on about nothing. These seem also abstract to us, like, because we think they're also, well, first we think that they're punishment because we're so used to the punishment mode. We're so used to the concept of God who made you and will punish you if you're naughty and reward you if you're not. There's no view like that in Buddhism, and that's the biggest one for us to get over. We're very used to the dualistic view of punishment and reward, you know, and we often just apply that to the view of karma. Nothing to do with it. That takes time because we're very used to this dualistic view of, like I said, punishment and reward. No view like that in Buddhism. There's no one punishing you. No, there's no rewarder and there's no punisher. We do it to ourselves. We are the punisher of ourselves. We are the rewarder, if you like. My Catholic mother used to say, virtue has its own rewards. This is what Buddha is saying. So the view of karma is fundamental to practice. Otherwise, it's the basis of Buddha's view of ethics, you know. We all know whether you're a good communist, good Buddhist, good whatever you like, it's rooted in ethics. So this is one way of framing all of Buddha's teachings in terms of ethics. So it's totally relevant. Although sometimes it seems surprising to us, it's totally relevant. And of course, then we say, well, you mean I've got to believe in reincarnation? No, don't believe in anything. Belief is not the point. You don't say, do I have to believe in mathematics? No, of course you don't. You prove it. You start with theory and then you eventually prove it experientially. Same with karma. You start with a theory, which first needs to be coherent intellectually, like any theory has to be coherent intellectually. And then you slowly, through experience, and it'll take time, prove it directly. And indeed, as the Dalai Lama says, if you prove it to be wrong, then you must reject the Buddha. So you've got to be patient, you know. So that's why we start with the theories. This is a huge one, actually. Many people say, oh, well, I'm not intellectual. I don't want to learn all the theories. I don't want to learn all the philosophy. Well, we're all intellectual. We all have lots of thoughts and we can use them wisely, you know. So you get a lot of confidence if you can have some coherent theory about something, just even a theory. If you begin cooking and you learn the theories and what the function of butter is and what the function of the flour and the function of the ingredients, it helps you understand how the cake works, you know. So understanding theories is hugely important, and we call that science. Well, that's exactly the Buddha's view. You start with a theory. How can you start any other way? How can you play Bach if you don't know the theories? It's like ridiculous. You don't just put your hands on the piano and Bach comes out. That's superstitious. But often that's what we don't do. We don't so-called study the teachings. We must do that. If you want to be a gardener, you have to study even a little botany. You know, you can't just say, oh, it's botany. Well, can you explain it to me? Oh, no, I don't know. You can't say that. You have to have even bare minimum understanding of the theories, you know. Same here, for sure. So the thing I found very powerful, I always say, I talk about this, that what I find powerful about the view of karma, when you really unpack it, not just an alternative to a creator, not just an alternative to punishment and reward, sounds the same initially. The hugest one is that there's no punishment and reward. That really takes time, meaning we are responsible. And you know perfectly well it's like that when it comes to your body and your health. Whatever you put in your mouth produces the body. Your body produces your body day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year. We know that, you know. So if you eat bad food and you know become obese or sick, you know, no one's punishing you. It's not punishment. It's not punishment because it implies someone's doing it to you. There's no view like that in Buddhism. It's quite shocking to think this, but we're very used to that view. This dualistic view of punishment and reward, it really relates to emptiness, actually. We've got this very dualistic view of me here and the world out there. And it's almost like conspiracy theories, you know? Concept of a creator or punishment, like the devil and the creator, the good and the bad. This one of, you know, the evil forces and good forces, often in those movies. I mean, like Peter Jackson's movies, that interesting, that New Zealand guy. What were those movies called? What are those movies? The people with the ears and everything.
Lord of the Rings.
That's the one, that lot, yeah. They're kind of like, this is me raving on now. All these movies talk about some kind of good essence and bad essence. So there's an evil somewhere, like that ring or something, wasn't it? And some evil. That's really the view of self-existence in Buddhism. It's a complete mistake. And I'm not being rude about creator, but that's like the good force, and then got the evil forces, and they're out there. And there's sort of like a conspiracy theory that there's someone behind it all. Absolutely, the concept of creator. And this is, I mean, I'm not trying to be controversial if you've got faith in a creator, but it's a conspiracy theory. There's someone behind it all. Buddha says there's no such thing. Every individual being creates their own reality. Everything we think and do and say produces our future. Everything we think and do and say produces our future. There's no one behind it. We are behind it. There's no one out there running it. Therefore, there's no punishment and reward. And we have that view. So as little children, look at the guilt we have, you know. Because why? We're imagining mummy going to punish, God's going to punish, the policeman's going to punish, daddy will punish, someone's going to find me out. That's why we try to hide the bad things we do. That's why we think if no one caught me, oh, I got away with it, we think. That's quite a schizophrenic idea, but we think like that. This concept of being found out and therefore punished, you know. And the same with good. You want to be found out if you're good. You want to be rewarded. You feel very disappointed if no one sees you being good. We don't think it's enough just to be good. We have to be found out to be good. Think what I'm saying. We need to be seen to be good, and we want to be not seen to be bad. That's a dualistic view. This is really showing the view of self-existence. We don't have the view of dependent arising and emptiness. That's absolutely rooted in the view of karma. We are our own creators. It's the way of putting it. It's a very powerful concept. For me, this is a major point in Buddhism that I just love. And if we think about emptiness, you know, we think about dependent arising, Buddha teaches three different, in order to understand emptiness, the final wisdom in Buddhism, the ultimate wisdom, the subtlest wisdom, the way really things do exist. The king of logics, as Lama Yeshe paraphrases Buddha, is dependent, that to prove the final way that things exist is in fact dependent arising, that things exist interdependently. And the three levels that Buddha teaches that, each of which is an argument with a prevailing view before that among the Hindus, you know. Excuse me, I didn't get my tissue. Did I get a tissue? Yes, I got one. I've got one. Thank you. I have to blow my nose, excuse me. So karma, the three levels that Buddha taught about dependent arising. The first is the one of cause and effect. Cause and effect is the first. And karma is a brilliant example of cause and effect. It's a perfect one. And karma, because it's related to the cause of me, the one we really think about most. I mean, cause and effect refers to everything. Everything is the product of causes. And why Buddha tells us this and goes into great detail is because there's a certain view that he's arguing with that says there is an I, there is a self that has not caused. So both the concept of a creator and a soul or an Atman are not caused. They don't have causes, they don't have parts. That this whole concept that Buddha is totally arguing with. No such thing can exist, he would say. Impossibility, the concept of a creator being uncaused. The Christians have very extensive teachings about how there can be a thing called a first cause. It's not viable for the Buddha. He argues with this at a philosophical level, meaning experiential, not just intellectual. It's not a possibility to be such a thing as a creator. In fact, the Buddha's idea of being, you are the product of a creator is a weird idea, that someone else can make you. That's very odd for the Buddha. Holy beings, high-level bodhisattvas and Buddhas can manifest countless versions of themselves, but they never become separate. They're not separate. You know, the Buddha can manifest as a dog. The dog might be separate. You could argue Buddha created a dog, but that dog is the Buddha. You can't, it's not anything else. It's not possible to create another person. Not like that. But there's extensive teachings in Buddhism, and all to do with related to cause and effect and dependent arising. So the Buddha's view is there are trillions and trillions and trillions of consciousnesses, minds, mind streams, and they're beginningless and endless. How can they start? It's not a possibility. As nutty as it sounds to us, it's the craziest idea, but it's not a possibility. If you posit cause and effect, you have to posit beginninglessness. which is insane for our mind. We just can't get our head around that. It blows our mind, As Lama says, blows up your mind. But it's the only logical conclusion. You cannot have a first cause. It's not possible. What caused it? It's very simple. If you posit cause and effect, you can't have a first cause. No possibility. So the very first level of cause and effect is karma is a brilliant example. So it's the cause of me. So this is where, again, the dualistic view that we have, if I'm made by a creator or made by mummy and daddy, or take the mummy and daddy one, the materialist view, forget the creator one. It's quite weird. I might sound like a fundamentalist, I don't know what, when I talk like this, but if I'm using this view of cause and effect, the idea that your mother can give you anger and give you love and give you compassion is too strange for words for the Buddha. They can give your body, no problem. That's pretty evident. Egg and sperm turn into your body. There's no argument there. You can see it. You can film the whole process from the time of conception up to birth. You can do that. But the mind, thoughts. So your mind is your own. Your mind is your own. It has got a past, but it's got its own past. So if you track your mind back perfectly to the first second of conception, and if you had good memory, you could do that second by second in an unbroken chain of mental moments, you will get back inexorably to the first second of conception. Then the second before that, egg was in mummy's body, sperm was in daddy's body. And where was your mind? Its own, it was there existing the moment before, the moment before, the moment before, the moment before, for that in the previous body, so on and so forth. So the point about karma and cause and effect, in this sense, karma, the powerful concept of it, as opposed to the view that my mother made me, my father made me, and that view brings, well, I didn't ask to get born. We say that as a joke, but we mean it very, really seriously. I did not ask to get born. It's very true if you have the materialist view. Someone else decided to have sex and literally make me. Excuse me, that's the most outrageous thing I've ever heard in my whole life. And when you get born and your therapist tells you have to stop blaming your mum, I disagree. You must sue her. I say that, and I mean it so sincerely. If your mother, father really did make you and give you anger and depression and jealousy and poverty and sickness, which is the logical deduction if you have the view of the materialist philosophical view. But the Buddhist view, equally, you don't want to blame God. That gets into a difficult area. So there's no blame, there's no punishment, there's no reward. You are the product of your past. It's not complicated. If you're a pianist today, it is logical. You can track back where your progress came from. Your practice is pretty clear, and you will take responsibility for that practice. You did it. You caused the musician. You caused the cook of today. Well, you caused the happiness of today, and you caused the suffering of today. That's all Buddha's saying. So the big one is that we are responsible. And this is what already taking the view of karma as a basis for understanding dependent arising, as a basis for understanding emptiness, already it loosens the grip of ego grasping, which is the colloquial term for the way this maripa, this primordial ignorance that clings to the self-existent me, functions. So karma is a very first step. It's so powerful as an antidote to ego grasping, as a method to loosen the grip of ego, as a method to start to realize emptiness. That what's called I, am the product of my past causes. It's dependent arising. But if you have the view of your mother and father, there's no view like that. I'm an innocent victim. I got plonked on this planet by somebody else necessarily. Bad things happened to me. I didn't cause it. I mean, this is logical. If you have the materialist view, there's not an explanation for most bad things that happen to people. There is not. You're walking down the street and this car runs over you. You did nothing wrong. I mean, we can see this in the world. This is why we suffer so badly. We have no idea why bad things happen. And we have no idea why good things happen. We don't ask that question. We don't care. Just give me more good. We don't care why. It's very shocking if you think about it. No wonder we're so crazy. At least if you're a Christian, you have devotion in God. At least you know God's got a plan. And I mean this seriously. I think it's a preferable view, quite frankly, in many ways. Because at least someone's got a plan. At least you've got faith in God who knows everything, and he's got a plan. And he keeps his plan in his pocket, and he's allowed to, because he's the boss. And if you have faith in God, you will be content because you know God has a plan. It's God's will. I find that an incredibly powerful teaching. Anybody who really has devotion in God, whether you're a Muslim or a Christian, you'll be a happy guy because you accept God's will. That's pretty amazing. I don't find that bad. I think that's a really powerful way to live your life. But if we have the materialist view, there is no logic. As we would say, we haven't found the reasons yet. That's what we'd say as scientists, isn't it? We don't know why bad things happen. We call it good luck and bad luck. That's a superstition. So at least the view of karma is an explanation. And to learn it, you have to sort of learn the whole deal because it's coherent internally. It's not coherent if you talk about the brain. It's a load of rubbish. Karma's nonsense if you talk about the brain. Karma's nonsense if you talk about a creator. But within the Buddhist teachings, karma is coherent within itself. Like acupuncture is coherent within itself. It's not coherent with allopathy. So you've got to learn the words, learn the concepts, learn the theories if you're interested. Not just say, oh, it's karma. That's not enough, you know. Oh, it's mathematics. Can you explain it, please? No, I can't do that. That's ridiculous. You have to learn it. Yeah, you choose to take on that theory, you know. Then it explains why your good things happen. Explains why good things happen. It's not good luck and bad luck. There's no concept of good luck and bad luck in Buddhism. That's just superstition. It's like having no concept of botany and just thinking when a tree grows, it's good luck. When a rose grows, it's good luck. No one knows why. That's exactly what it's like, you know. So the Buddha's view of karma is coherent within itself. And it's super sophisticated. It's super fascinating. It doesn't work if you believe your mind is your brain. It doesn't work at all. So you have to posit the possibility mind is not physical. You have to posit the possibility of reincarnation. These are all the things you posit as the possibilities, as the theories, as your working hypothesis. It's the only way to get your head around it all. I mean, we're intelligent people. We can easily do it. It's up to us, you know. Otherwise, it's just not coherent. But really, it's delicious when you think of it as a first reasoning to prove emptiness. In other words, I remember when I first studied with Geshe Tektok, my philosophy teacher, excuse me, in England in the 1970s, late 70s, early 80s. I remember he used the example, when we were discussing dependent arising, he used the example of the person called Robina, which of course is why I remember it, you know. He said that it can be said that everything in the universe up to the first moment of Robina is validly a cause and a condition for the existence of Robina. I thought it was pretty cosmic when he said it. In other words, you start thinking, okay, there's Robina. So you can track a million different tracks of the different causes of Robina. One of the causes is my mother, without which there would not be a Robina, that's clear. So you posit the mother, then where did the mother come from? Well, you posit a previous mother, and you can go back to beginningless mums. Then you go dads, then you go the physical. Then, I mean, everywhere you turn, you know, there's got a series of causes before it, a series of causes before that, tracking back. This is logical, you know. Everything in the universe can be said to be validly a cause and a condition for the existence of that computer. This should be. You have to think that through, you know, it's very fascinating. So the idea is, so there's three levels of dependent arising. You want to prove the emptiness of I. One is causes. The second is I. Okay, I, in this case, Robina, or you, Fred, whoever you are, Sheila, Sunny, the name given to this phenomenon called a person, or the name given to this phenomenon called a computer or a mug, whatever the phenomenon might be, same logic. That the first level is that this person is the product of causes. It's the first level of dependent arising, that I is existing in dependence upon previous causes. And among all those countless causes, you will not find I, because I is nothing other than the product of those causes, the result of the causes. The second level of dependent arising now, this is not karma, there's another level, this more subtle one, is that I, or the computer or the mug, whatever, exists in dependence upon its parts, its bits and pieces. This is the major argument. This is the major logic we need to really use to prove the absence of the intrinsic I, you know, which is the subtlest wisdom that Buddha is telling us about. Karma is a good start. So the first one of karma, cause and effect. Instead of the feeling, how we suffer so terribly when bad things happen, isn't it? We suffer terribly when bad things happen. It's so shocking to our poor being. I'm talking about trauma. We live in trauma, you know, because we don't know why that happened to me. Why does this happen to me? Why did that person harm me? Why did that car run over me? Why did I get thrown out of my job? Why did my husband leave me? Why did bad things happen? It's so shocking to us. If we have the view of karma, and I'm not joking, you do not have trauma because you know why it's happening. You have an explanation. This is huge. This is huge, really huge. But because we don't have an explanation, we don't have a view of cause and effect. We can't see the causes involved in being run over by a car. You know, or why someone punches you in the nose. When you read about anybody who's reported in the news about doing a bad thing to somebody, they always go back into that person's psychology, what happened, where they were born, their environment, their mother did this, their father did that, their sickness is this, they're mentally ill. That explains very nicely why the person did the harm, but it never helps me know why me. So the real question is why me, and we don't have any question. We don't have any answer for that. Why me? It's just like accidental, you know. So the karmic one is why me. And when you have that view, you'd be like those young Tibetan nuns. I always quote back in 2003 in New York. I'm in New York, aren't I? I forget when I'm talking. You see. Oh, yeah, in New York, 2003, Richard Gere invited His Holiness the Dalai Lama to teach. And he also decided to work with some people in prison. So he invited some of people like me who've been working with people in prison to attend this meeting. It was a very nice meeting. He had 20 former prisoners. I always quote this story. He invited 20 former prisoners, all of whom had done some kind of meditating in prison. So anyway, they met His Holiness, and it was a very moving day. And and also he invited a couple of young Tibetan nuns who'd been imprisoned in Tibet and sexually abused and tortured, in prison. And they were telling their story. So I find this is such a powerful example. I'm going to unpack it, okay? For a person who's got the view of karma, how it prevents you from living in nightmare, quite literally, because we have an explanation for why it happens. That's really what trauma is. We don't know why something terrible happens, so we live in denial of it. We push it away, so it's got to come up at some point. I mean, we've all got PTSD, if you think of it that way. Everybody's got PTSD, it's no joking, because we haven't dealt with the traumas as they happen, because we have no means, because we can't answer the question, why is this happening to me? We go mad, So these young women, there they were being tortured and sexually abused in prison, and there they were explaining their experience, telling the people. And what was evident, this I find so powerful, using the Buddhist analysis. What was evident, I think, to everybody in the audience, there's 20 prisoners and the people like me, the group of people, 30 people maybe. What was evident was they weren't angry. I find this so fascinating. I'd love to unpack this. They weren't angry. So we don't trust that in our culture, because we think if you're not angry, you must have suppressed. Not for the Buddhist view. So we have to analyze why weren't they angry? Then we have to analyze what's anger. So let's analyze anger psychologically. So that means all these emotions we talk about. This is the Buddhist view of the mind, isn't it? All these emotions: anger, depression, jealousy, rage, despair, low self-esteem, arrogance, you name it. They're the names for what we refer to as these powerful feelings that rise to the surface, isn't it? But usually where the body is very involved and they're traumatic experiences. So then all these emotions, all these feelings, as we call them, if we drill down, this is the Buddhist view, we're going to see that's just that grosser level of the shouting and the yelling or the despair or whatever. When the body's involved, that's just the tip of the iceberg. If you drill down into the mind, which is what our job is, of being our own therapist, using the Buddhist view of the mind, drilling down into the mind, we're going to see that all these emotions that we experience at the level of our body are rooted in being conceptual stories. Buddha is your best cognitive behavioral therapist, and I'm not joking. It's sourced back directly to the Buddha. This is exactly the approach in Buddhism. that when you drill down in your mind through much meditation, more and more concentration, you literally go deep down and you unpack and unravel the layers and layers and layers, first of emotions, but eventually they get to the conceptual level. So when you think of anger, think of jealousy, you think of rage, you think of arrogance, you think of low self-esteem. We think of them as emotions, but speak them out. Speak them out. What's anger saying? Listen to what anger says. Listen to what anger says. How dare this happen to me? I don't deserve it. That's the worst trauma of anger, is when something brutal happens to you, like being raped and tortured. Forget about just being run over by a car. Forget about bumping your knee. Forget about the red light. Forget about your hubby slurping his tea. Whatever happens that attachment doesn't want is called anger. And it's natural insofar as we've all got it. So you have anger. If you would be saying the thought, the only person who says the thought, how dare that happen to me, I don't deserve it, is a person who doesn't have the view of karma. Or let's say I punch Sunny, then she punches me right back. Okay, that's my experience. My experience when I was a radical feminist, I always tell this story too. When I was a radical feminist, and I was a serious radical feminist, and I was living in England, it was like in 1971 or something, 72. And I remember my policy, this is very serious. My policy was any man who said something to me in the street, which is very common, you get arrested now. It's politically incorrect to say anything, isn't it? So then it was completely, everybody did what they wanted, men. And any man who said anything about my body, like and I had a nice chest, very nice chest, you know, and people would say something about my chest. So I would walk up to him, I'd scream at him, I'd abuse him, and I'd often punch him. This is what I did, right? Now, most men accepted it, were a bit shocked and a bit embarrassed if I punched him, you know, or abused his thing between his legs, whatever I did. It was my policy, all right? I didn't call the police, I took it in my own hands. But one fellow hit me back. It was the first time it ever happened, and only one time ever. This guy I hit him, and his fish and chips went flying, and he started chasing me. So I was running down the street, and he got me, and he punched me in the nose. But my feeling, this is the point, I did not get angry with him. Why should I? Just punch him myself. Can you imagine if I got upset with him? I honored him. I kind of almost felt respectful to him. He was the first guy who punched me back. Are you hearing me, people? I did not have the slightest anger. I honored the man practically. I mean, I broke my glasses, he broke my earrings, you know, but I really accepted it. Do you hear my point? It's just that there's a few lives between punches, that's all. And we forget. So anger, my point is these nuns did not have, this is the point you've got to hear. They did not have the thought. How dare this happen to us? Rape and torture people. How dare this happen to us? We don't deserve it. They didn't have that thought because they had the view in their bones of the philosophical view of karma. That was what they thought. So when you don't have the view, I didn't ask to get born, it's not my fault, how dare that happen to me, then you wouldn't, they didn't, I mean, of course they suffered, but you don't suffer mentally because you have a view of why it's happening. This is very shocking for us. In the same way, I did not get upset with that guy. I mean it and I promise. Not on the slightest. How should I? How absurd I got upset with him. I just punched him myself. This is really huge. Anger is the view of an innocent victim. I know it sounds very shocking because terrible things happen to us in the life. But what was also fascinating is it's exactly the same logic when it comes to good things happening. It's exactly the same logic. So when good things happen, you know, we don't say, oh my God, why? I mean, we sort of do. Why did I win the lottery? I mean, we know we did nothing to deserve it. That's why we call it good luck. We like good luck. We don't like bad luck. You know, we lose your job or the hubby hits you or something. I mean, are we communicating or I just sound wacky? So that's why we've got to drill down beyond the emotions because we only access what we think and feel at the grossest level. And we don't think what we think, we only think what we feel. We only notice it when the body's feeling it. This is our biggest point. So this is the greatest tool that Buddha's given us, is the ability to work on our mind, to get some focus, and to begin to unpack and unravel those feelings at the physical level, to go down to the conceptual level, where they are all these elaborate conceptual stories. This is exactly the Buddha's view. Anger is a conceptual story. How it says exactly that. How dare this happen to me? I don't deserve it. That's the feeling of anger, isn't it? So let's look at anger. Anger is the response to when attachment doesn't get what it wants, because attachment is the driving force. This is the deepest conceptual story before you get to ego grasping, because attachment is the voice of ego grasping. But even attachment, the voice is incredible. So what's attachment saying? It's saying, I only deserve good things. It's this hubris, this outrageous assumption that I only deserve good. So anger is, how dare that happen? I don't deserve bad. And attachment is an assumption, like this greedy assumption, this hubris. I know it sounds so shocking, that I only deserve good. So when we get good, we take it for granted. And you give me more, please. So these are completely questioned. When you have the view of karma and you have the view of emptiness, it's nonsense to think I only deserve good. And it is nonsense to think I don't deserve bad. They're superficial conceptual constructs that we have made up, Buddha would say. Attachment and aversion. They're conceptual constructs that we have practiced for countless lives to the point where they're totally emotional and totally instinctive. So you have to unpack and unravel them. This takes time. And eventually it gets you to unpack and unravel the ridiculousness, the ridiculous conception of all, that there's an inherent me. So the view of karma is huge. So those nuns, right, they were Tibetan, brought up since they're born. So in the same way that for us, in our materialist world, even though we're Christians and Muslims and whatever, the materialist view is the most prevailing, I'd say. It dominates, unless you're a really devoted Christian and believe in, you know, creation and all that stuff. I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying that in the bones of our being is the view that my brain is me, mummy made me, daddy made me, all our psychology are rooted in that view, all of our neuroscience is rooted in that view. That's very, very powerful views. So they're in the bones of our being. Now, these Tibetans, for 1,200 years, Buddhism's been in Tibet, and there's been 99% of Tibetans were Buddhists, not so much now. So it's in the bones of their being, and has been in Asia for 3,000 plus years. The view of karma is just a given, you know, it's a given for them. It's a total given since they're born. So they've been embedded, it's embedded in their being. So it has been the basis of how they've responded to daily life. You've got to really see this, you know, how deep it goes. Our view is how deep it goes, these philosophical views we all have. So for these young women, this was the most natural thing on the planet, to have the view of karma. So it then determined every second of how they responded to this experience. Of course it did. Of course they weren't happy. Who wants to be raped and tortured? Nobody. But they had a reason why. And that's what trauma is. We don't know why it is happening. It's kind of shocking for us. We don't know how to respond, so we bury it, or we go crazy, or we murder the person, you know, because we don't know how to deal with it. We don't know how to interpret it. We don't know how to explain it to ourselves. So we go crazy, you know. I mean, if you have total faith in a creator, then you won't go crazy. I remember this couple years ago in Malaysia, one of the flights crashed, and most of them from Malaysia were mostly Muslims, and this Muslim mummy and daddy were asked, how do you feel about the death of your daughter? We are peaceful, they said. She belongs to God, and he has taken her back. They were not distressed. They were sad, but they weren't raging. Why is this happening to our daughter? Because they had a philosophical explanation, and it was real for them, you know. So the thing is, we don't even know what we think half the time. We just take things as a given. We just have assumptions about things, and we don't question. We don't question anger. We don't question attachment. They're cognitive constructs. Like I said, Buddha's your best cognitive therapist. I'm not joking, you know. So these young women, not only Well, they're not freaking out, but they then said, one of them said, at the end, she said, and of course, we had compassion for our torturers because we know we must have harmed them in the past. That's the view they have, you know. And we know that they will suffer in the future. That's the real basis of real compassion. That a person is, by harming me, that person is harming themselves. That's the view of karma, you know. So that's huge view. Not just some interesting book, reading a book, that you internalize. That's really what being a Buddhist means, you know, starting with that view. This is Buddhist view, you know, this is Buddhist practice, Buddhist philosophy. It's totally relevant. And it helps you loosen the grip of ego grasping because you realize you're not this dualistic being who got plonked on this planet by somebody else, some conspiracy theorist called God or mummy or daddy or whatever, but you're the product of your own actions. You don't remember them, but that's the logic. If you look at a tree in the ground, you don't remember planting it. You don't remember who planted it, but you know if it's your garden, it's your tree. So our life is our garden, and whatever's in it, we planted it, we grew it, we created it. That's the really powerful way to have the view of karma. Those young women had that view. So that sustained them during that nightmarish experience of being imprisoned, you know. But they didn't go crazy. They didn't have what we call PTSD because they had a way of dealing with it. We would not have PTSD if we all dealt with things like this. That's the point. We don't have the means. But you see, this is the suffering aspect, but the good aspect is powerful too. Because every second of anything that happens to us, happy or suffering, is the same logic. Botany refers to flowers and weeds, you know. We tend to think we deserve good. So it's like an arrogance. I mean, let's look at attachment. It's very fascinating. Attachment is fascinating, actually. It's this hubris, the deepest in our bones. It's an assumption. It's at the level of assumption. Of course, it's the main voice of the I in the first place, but it's effectively the main cause of our suffering in day-to-day life. That's what Buddha says in the Four Noble Truths. Attachment's an assumption every second that I must only get the good things because I only deserve good. See, this is one about deserve. We use that word. We use that word. They don't talk like this in Buddhism. Deserve. It's heavy duty, you know. If you look in your bank, you never say, how dare there are no dollars in my bank. I deserve dollars. Think about why you don't say that. This is the point. Because you know it's your bank account. You know that what's in there or not is the fruit of your hard work or not. You own that bank account. You never say, how dare there are no dollars. I deserve dollars. That implies somebody else is supposed to put dollars in your bank. What a joke. How ridiculous. You don't look at your garden and say, who put weeds in my garden? I don't deserve weeds. Why not? Because you know it's your garden and you grew it. That's the view of karma. As Lama Zopa says, everything is our own karmic appearance. When we really practice this, this is really helping us realize emptiness, I tell you. Because the view, the way we are now with a sense of a dualistic separate me, which is the function of ego grasping, is that we're an innocent victim. There's no reason why things are happening. No one knows why good things happen. We don't mind that. Just give me more because I deserve them. But what do you mean you deserve them? What do you mean deserve? Deserve implies you must have done the work. You know you deserve dollars in the bank because you put them there. So if you use the word deserve, it's a good word. You do deserve the dollars because you put them there, not who hasn't put dollars in my bank because I deserve them. No, that's an assumption. So the deserve we talk about is that it should come from out there. That's the innocent victim. That's how victims talk. Somebody else better love me because I deserve it. You only deserve something if you create it. Think that way. You deserve those flowers in your garden because you grew them. And if you like, you deserve the weeds because you didn't pull them out. But we don't think like that in our world. We just think I deserve happiness. Somehow I deserve it. And I don't deserve bad. But we don't think it's got anything to do with ourselves. This is quite schizophrenic, really. The Lama Yeshe would say like that. And all this is rooted in the dualistic view of ego grasping, no emptiness, no dependent arising, no dependent arising at all. We're set in stone, fixed, concrete, absolute, you know. That's why we suffer so badly, Buddha says. So karma is an amazing example of dependent arising. It's so delicious. It's a dependent arising of me, you know, of who I am and why things happen to me, who I am and why good things happen and why bad things happen. It explains it. It's the logic for it. And then you can handle your life because you know why things are happening. If you don't know botany, you have no explanation for why weird things pop up in your garden, and you live in fear because you never know what's going to happen. Who knows if a big weed's going to take over my house? But if you know botany, you don't live in fear. Well, if you know karma, you're under control, honey. There's no fear. You have an explanation for why things happen. It's huge. Like learning any law of cause and effect. Botany, engineering, numbers, you know, same logic. Karma is the same logic. There's Buddha's observation, that's all, about how things exist. Not made up by him. He's observed it. It's a natural law like math. It's a natural law like botany. It's a natural law like gravity. Buddha's saying that. That's for us to find out, you know. We just think it's superstition made up by some wacko person. No, if you can prove it. I mean, it's not. There's no view in that. Buddha's not a creator. It's his observation. Clearly, it implies a subtle level of observation, doesn't it? Because it's implying past lives, future lives. And that's the observation of a person who's accessed their mind using shamatha, this genius technique these Indians invented 3,000 years ago. Now, I think I've been raving on quite a bit. What time is it? Time to go home already. Look at that. A whole hour. You better ask me some questions. Come on, you people. I don't talk that long normally. Come on. Questions. Yes, go.
What was the third level of dependent arising?
Okay, absolutely. The first one, cause and effect, causes. The second is parts. I didn't go into that, but that brings you to the third. So the parts one, let's just use the mug, you know, the cup. First of all, causes, it's the fruit of causes. There's nothing here that isn't the fruit of past causes, and therefore you won't find mug among those causes. Now let's try and look into the parts of the mug. And and this is the big mistake we make. We say, so then the logic is that mug exists in dependence upon its parts, the handle, the clay, the paint, the base. And those parts, among all those parts, you won't find mug, because mug is nothing other than the coming together of the parts. So then that leads you to that mug exists depending upon the label mug, that it's merely labeled. That's the subtlety. So the first one is cause and effect, it's causes. The second is parts, and that leads you to the conclusion that mug is merely labeled, that mug exists in dependence upon the mind labeling it mug. That's the subtlest one. That is the final conclusion. Okay? Briefly. All right. What else, people? Who's there? Hello, then. Tzu Yang, you talk to me.
Hi, Robina. Thank you.
Good.
Can I ask you something that's not necessarily related to karma?
Go for it. Yeah.
So during this pandemic, it's been very hard for me to meditate because my mind.
Why is that, do you think? Why is that?
My mind is just very fragmented.
Really?
I have no focus, and so I meditate every day in the mornings, but sometimes I used to go to the Zendo and do that in person, and now we do it online, and sometimes I can only do 10 minutes. I used to do 3 periods of 30 minutes in one day, and now my mind is just shattered.
So then, first of all, you're talking about a certain kind of meditation. So you implied Zen. That's a particular kind of mindfulness type of meditation, is it?
Yeah.
So why do you say It's not, because what should it be that you think it wasn't? I mean, what is it you're disappointed about? What should have been the result that you feel you're not getting? What should have your mind been like that you feel it hasn't been? What is it you're expecting? So please explain that to me.
I guess I would like to be more peaceful and not so scattered, not so unfocused.
I understand. So then go on, the question.
I guess my question is, how can I get back to being a little bit more focused and
What's it got to do with the pandemic? I don't understand the relationship between the pandemic and your mind being scattered and fragmented. What does that, tell me about that.
I think with the isolation and also
Your voice is breaking up.
just more.
Voice is breaking up. Yeah.
Sorry, I think it has to do with the isolation and also a sense of trauma of feeling unsafe and
Really worried, anxious, really getting sick and everything, yeah, or your job or what?
It's been very isolating. It's
Right.
still, even though it's been almost 3 years.
Yes, I understand. So when you say you meditate, that's one thing I understand, but do you actually look into all these things that I've been describing this last hour? Do you try to dig down and look into attachment, look into your anger, look into your fears, try to get the conceptual story that's behind these feelings? Do you ever do that? Any type of inner analysis of what's driving you? Or you don't do that? It's not part of your practice?
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit. I mean, I thought what was really powerful about your talk, when you're talking about the Tibetan nuns and they had been tortured and raped and what they were talking about, and how they lacked anger. You reminded me of that. A few years ago, that very young white supremacist went into the black church in South Carolina and killed people.
Right. That's right.
And a few weeks later, a woman who lost her relative, she went to court and she said in front of everybody, she said, "I forgive you."
Right.
And that was so shocking and powerful to me because Robina, I get angry at people in my building because I say hello to them and they don't say hello back.
I understand exactly. I understand
just,
exactly. I understand. Yes, exactly. But so this is what I'm getting at. One thing is meditation, sure, and the type you're doing, that's one approach only to practice. But I think you're expecting a bit much of yourself to think that your meditation will suddenly make you peaceful. I think there's more to it than that. And that means, this is the way I've been describing here. I mean, I've just been talking in my own way, but I'm using all the things that I've learned over the years about the theories, karma, the mind, the way it works. And that's the basis of what we need to use all. So, whenever you get angry, when you understand that you get angry when someone doesn't say hello to you, you've got to analyze what that is. And so that's where attachment is the basis of that. So the main attachment we have is attachment to being seen and approved of. So the feeling of hurt and insult, how dare that person not respond to me? You got to analyze what that is. This is a Buddhist view. I mean, this is one of Buddhist approach. So, that's attachment, the need to be seen and approved of, and then upset because someone doesn't approve of you. That's what's tormenting us all the time, all these things. Or attachment is when anger is when you don't get what attachment wants. That's kind of simple, but quite profound. And when you notice this, and then you do some bit of it, kind of, you be your own therapist and you talk to yourself, well, that's ridiculous. I'm fine as I am. I don't need someone just to approve of me, especially a stranger. You analyze this and you learn to slowly do this kind of it's like cognitive therapy. You really learn to try and change the way you respond to things. So there's more than just doing your practice, more than just doing your meditation, I think. And that's for you just to read the Buddha's teaching sometimes. I mean, do you do that? Do you like to do that?
Yeah.
Well, so you should try to apply those points. That's the point, not just, sweetheart, I mean, you think there's, I mean, are you still feeling?
So can I just ask you something though, because the way you're explaining that, it's but it's also very intellectual. And
But,
you know,
but
and
it's,
and
of
I
course it's intellectual. Stop. No, stop. Of course it's intellectual because words are necessarily intellectual. But if you're learning music, it's very intellectual, but you've got to make it experiential. That's your job. You've got to learn the theories first. Then you put it into practice. So you've got, so this is another, okay, there are different approaches. Sitting there and watching your mind is very powerful, but you can also add these other approaches by doing an analysis of your anger, an analysis of it, and hearing the conceptual story and then arguing. That's also a powerful practice. There are many doorways into working in your mind. You know, there are many doorways.
but what right, but what I'm saying is that I know certain things, and that's like on an intellectual level, like I shouldn't eat too much chocolate tonight, you know, but that doesn't address the emotional side. That's what I'm trying to get at, you know.
No, it does, because if you analyze, if you just call it, okay, if you know you shouldn't eat too much chocolate and then you eat the chocolate and then you get guilty with yourself, that's not helpful. But knowing you shouldn't eat chocolate then determines that your hand stays in your lap and you don't eat the chocolate. And then you succeeded in your conceptual thought. It became experiential. The theories have to become experiential. If you just leave them in your head, then that's being intellectual and you go nuts. So that's the other one. I mean, when you learn Buddha's teachings, you learn, he talks about the neurotic, deluded, unhappy states of mind, attachment and guilt and anger. They're very painful for us. So if you're suffering, it's because of those states of mind. You're not suffering because of love and compassion and kindness. And that's another whole approach. When you're feeling lonely and isolated, that's because, you know, and I'm not being rude now because we all feel it, but there's another approach as well, that what can I do to help others? How can I go out there and do something and use myself? There's different approaches, not just only just watching your mind. There's many ways we can do things. Are we communicating?
Yes.
I mean, you're an intelligent guy, you're a kind man, you look like a nice looking fellow. There's lots of things you can be doing in your life. And we all know that if we reach out to other people who are all in the same boat, we're all suffering. This is very powerful practice for oneself. And the Dalai Lama said, if you want to help others, practice compassion. If you want to help yourself, practice compassion. So there's different approaches, you know, different ways of helping ourselves. So helping others is also a powerful practice for our own sake. Don't underestimate that.
Mm-hmm.
To get past our isolation, to get past our loneliness, to get past our mind being scattered. We can get too caught up in it sometimes. So just reach out to others. That can be an instant antidote for oneself. Don't discount that. Are we communicating?
Yes.
Good.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, darling. Who else? Somebody else? Anybody else? Anyone else? Yes.
So what would be the best way to really internalize the theory of karma? Because I've been coming to the classes.
Yeah.
I listen to it.
Sure.
It makes sense to me.
Yeah,
I
right.
like what I'm hearing. And
Yeah.
then I leave here and I
Then it's all gone.
I make bad decisions.
No, that's right, of course.
And I suffer the consequences.
That's right, yeah.
And I see that I deserve those consequences, but I still then get angry about it.
I understand. It just takes, it's like anything. That's why I always like to use this example. It's like takes anything. You could, this is becoming music theory class, you know. Now, if you hear it and you like it, and you walk out the door and you forget to practice it, it'll never become real for you. Well, you've got to practice it. So that means, and that means if you study Buddhism properly, if you want to, you learn it first, you learn the theories first, and then gradually you keep applying them. But it really just does take time. I mean, it really just does take time.
Is there anything that speeds up the time?
Practicing piano 24 hours a day, you'll speed it up, yes. But I mean, darling, what can we do? We're only got as much time as we can cope with. Say it again.
If you were to do practice positive steps towards good karma,
Yes.
with intention that you were doing it.
Yeah, of course, all of, I mean, sure. Okay, this is why the Buddhist teachings, are starting at the most simple level. And that's the Buddha says that they apply the view of karma, at least in your own life, have good ethics. This is how you start with it. So at least you decide I'm going to control my body and speech. They talk like you've got your body, your speech, and your mind. The real job is being your own therapist, knowing on your mind. But you've got to start with the servants of your mind. And the servants of your mind are your speech and your body. So the starting point is, at least in the Buddhist view, you'd try to, you'd refrain from harming others with your body. You'd shut your mouth. And then eventually you get the idea, when you realize you're driven by attachment and anger and the delusions, then you start to maybe, okay, forget that. Even the one of speech is tremendous. I mean, when you say you get angry, do you shout it out of your mouth or you just keep quiet? What? Sometimes, okay. So then this is already a good start. You control your speech. It sounds boring as hell. It sounds like, oh, come on, so boring. Your mother sounds like your grandma, you sound like your mummy. But this is really true. If we can, but it's taken me all these years to say that. I've got uncontrolled speech, uncontrolled behavior. I remember always joking, saying, Lama Yeshe one time I was feeling all self-piteous. This is years ago. And he said, nothing wrong with your heart, dear. It's just your behavior. So, it takes so long to hear these boring, simple teachings. I've been hearing this for 45 years, and I'm saying it with some conviction now. Control my body and speech, it takes time. Mm-hmm. So if you control your body and speech, if you feel like you're in control, then you begin to be in control of your mind. It's a gradual process. And then you've got to become familiar with the concept of karma and learn the different things. And then you have a practice. We do a practice every day where we purify our karma. There's all these things. It just takes time, though.
Is there a role for meditation to play in making that?
Totally, it's all part of it. Yeah. Absolutely. Of course it is. It's framed in terms of meditations, in fact. There's more ways of meditating than merely watching your breath or doing what is that? Where is he's gone? What he says. Mm-hmm. There's a whole way of structuring your practice, including meditation and daily things. Of course there is. Like anything, What do you think? We'll see how you go with it. Just follow your heart. Follow it where it goes. Yes, Margie. Hello, darling.
Hello, Robina.
Hello.
I can't believe, I've been a so-called Buddhist for so long. And I'm just sort of BSing myself. I need to practice compassion, but right now I am by being funny. But I realize I'm all about the baloney of how cool it is to say I'm a Tibetan Buddhist. And I'm really touched and challenged by your teaching, because I realize I ain't much practicing. And I have a practical example in that I'm teaching a class, and I think I've been told I'm a good teacher, but I'm a lot afraid about the class I'm going to do on Wednesday. Right. And projecting into the future. But I'm looking at, well, how can I counterbalance that? I'm pretty ethical, but I'm thinking, and I'd like your thoughts. Like, I get I need to be my own therapist, but maybe I'm looking at practical ways to deal with the fear, the projection, the attachment. Should I do
your class on Wednesday? Yeah, I know, Margie, this is, the more, I remember Lama Yeshe, he said one time, it's really true, I could tell you about attachment for one whole year, and we'll never begin to understand it until we start digging deep. So when I chat away here, I'm kind of coming from my own experience a little bit, but you start with attachment at the first level, you control eating too many pizza cake. You don't jump on so many girls. You start at the grossest level. But then as we start to really see the deepest way we suffer from attachment, it's the attachment to how people see us. It's attached to what people think of us. It's attached to, you're someone like him here, where was he? Someone who doesn't even know, doesn't respond nicely. We get upset because poor little ego is so fragile. This tiniest thing that goes wrong. This is the deepest pain we have. This is the deepest attachment of all. And it's so primordial, Margie. We're so hungry to be seen, and this is the real dualistic one. It's sort of like attachment is the symptom of a really half a person. We don't even have confidence in our own who we are. We need some stranger not to be mean to us. We need a stranger to smile back at us to make us feel they're worthwhile. It's pretty deep, honey. So just the more we notice it, the more you apply it. The more you apply the antidote. It's okay. Slowly.
Actually, it's really helpful just to hear you say that, because I realized holy cow, I'm so freaking attached to my ego. And
We are, darling. This is the deepest one. They say it's the last one to go. I always quote this, that the yogis in the mountains have given up everything, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll. They're really committed, they're disciplined, but they're still thinking about what the people in the village are thinking about them.
right.
The last one to go. So it's okay. Don't worry about it. It's the last one to go, Margie. So at least delight you're helping other people and everything, and notice how ridiculous we are, and just catch it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Petal. Who else? Some questions? Any points to bring up? No. Yes, go, honey.
Would you recommend the text to learn more about the dependent arising?
For dependent arising. Oh, okay. I mean, sure. Lama's Zopa, he never stops talking about dependent arising. So you go onto lamayeshi.com and you just look up Lama Zopa and emptiness and dependent arising, you'll find 4,000 pages to read. That's one. But I mean, he never stops, you know, that's how he talks. So there's also, you know, this like, he talks about karma too. Yeah. There's so many. I mean, that's one, but there's some good books, of course. Dalai Lama talking about, I mean, there's a Heart Sutra he talks about very much about dependent arising there, because it's the king of logics to prove emptiness. Then you can talk, there's a really good book. There's so many. And just start with Lama Zopa. Okay. And you just go from there. Follow your nose. Follow your heart. Who else, people? What else is there? Yes, Eileen.
Hi, Robina. Good evening. Just very quickly, I know what the parents that we incarnate to, obviously, we're very karmically connected to.
That's right.
And that we bring in our own tendencies, right? But certain parents can make those tendencies either worse or help you a little bit.
Yeah,
but I guess that's karma too.
Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is, honey. I mean, that's one of the logics of dependent arising.
Yes.
First of all, the materialist view is missing the piece that we bring our own stuff with us. It's only that mummy and daddy are the main cause. They are causes. Of course, they're causes of what happens. If someone punches you in your nose, you can't say they're not one of the causes of your anger, but the main cause of your anger is your own anger. You can't say the person who gives you money isn't the cause of your happiness, but the main cause of getting the money is your past generosity.
I
So
see.
it's not as if it contradicts it doesn't contradict that they're a cause. It's just that the main cause is more subtle, and that's where the karmic one is. That's all. I mean, so like my mother was a musician.
Mhm.
So then
Mhm.
she saw her little Bobsy had tendency to be good at music. So she
Mhm.
taught me singing. So then obviously we all say, oh, well, Robina's good at music because her mother was good at music.
Mhm.
No, my mother was good at music because she'd practiced it before and brought it with her. And I must have been good at music because I had practiced it before and I brought it with me. And I had the good fortune to have a mother who was a musician who could help me nourish my music. That's all. It's not illogical. It's just when you think of it that way, you know.
Right, but you could have had a mother who was jealous of that in you.
Equally,
Do you know what I'm saying? When you,
also
so that's
create the cause for that.
right.
You create the cause for that. That's the point.
Right. I see. Thank you.
Everything is,
Yeah.
it takes a while because we're so used to believing that the only causes are the external. All
Mhm.
Buddhism is adding that the mind is more subtle than that. You even, the fact that you're born to a mother who's good at music, or the fact that you're born to a mother who is jealous of your music, each of those is you are the cause of that. If whatever is out there is we created the cause to meet that, to have that. You know, you have born to a mother who's got the tendency to get cancer. That's a fact. But you created the cause due to past killing to be born to a mother who had cancer, which means you've got the genes to get cancer. You just have to got to get our head around this idea because we're not used to thinking it, you know.
That's profound. Yes. Thank you.
Hello, Mary, dear darling. Talk to me.
Hello, Robina. Could you talk a little bit about collective karma? Because it feels as if we live in this craziness now that some people, like say in this culture where you are, where I am in the United States, are just insane. And then if you're in some place like, say, Dharmkot, the people aren't so insane. It's a very different kind of an experience to be there, even just to walk around and just be with those people. They don't act the same way. So what is it about collective karma and how do we relate to that?
Of course, I mean, do you notice that we're very social beings? From the
Well,
time
we used to be.
we are what I'm meaning is everybody. I mean, we're born to another person. We don't get born out of the sky and fall onto the earth. We rely upon a mother to give birth to us. We rely upon a father to give the mother some sperm. I mean, we are social beings in our nature. This is the karma we have. We are very dependently related to many sentient beings. So therefore, we do things as groups. We do things as a family. We do things as a race. We do things as a group. We do things as a country. We do things as groups, and so we experience the fruits as groups. Hardly surprising.
But what is our personal role when we find ourselves in a situation of collective karma that we A, recognize isn't healthy, and B, would like to address in some way? Or are we just helpless in it because we're there?
Well, just give a simple example of what you're
Well, I live in a country where I don't dare withhold my taxes or I'll just die anonymously in jail, but they're all going to drop bombs on other people. That's one thing.
No, don't make it dramatic. Keep it simple. What are you saying?
Okay,
Just give me a
simple is
simple example.
people are very competitive and not particularly kind to each other, and they'll climb right over each other.
Stop right there. Stop right there. It is true. There are some people who are very competitive and are mean to each other. What's your question?
My
What's your
question is, if you live in a culture that is hard-edged like that, where there isn't a leading with the heart, there's a leading with greed and things.
These are very big, dramatic, universal statements you're making. Can you keep it more simple, please? Come right down to earth.
I'm not sure if I can. I
Okay,
mean, it
of
feels,
course you can, for God's sake. Have you got a family? Do you have mothers?
yes,
Brothers,
yes.
aunties, husbands, uncles, dogs, aunts? Do you have sentient beings in your life?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so analyze it. Some are nice to you. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
And some are unkind to you. Do you agree with that?
Mostly they're nice, but yes.
Okay, so then that means you have the karma with a group of people due to your virtue to be around people who are kind to you. Well done. Now, if you go to one suburb in one city where all the junkies live and all the thieves live, or you go to the Ukraine tomorrow where there's a war zone, you have a different collective karma. You've got the karma with all those people to be abused and harmed and have bombs dropping on you. You go to a nice little village in Switzerland where people keep their doors open and the environment is pristine and the snow is clean and nice and the food is delicious. That's another group karma. There are millions of examples, and every one of them is the fruit of your past actions.
It feels as if you can't do very much where you are to make
You are
it
talking
better.
about changing the world. You're not talking, well, of course you can't change everybody else. If you walk over, you go to the Ukraine tomorrow, you can't do much to change it because everybody right now is in the midst of this appalling karmic result of their own actions from 4,000 lives ago, where they're being bombed and are bombing. You can't walk in there and be big mummy or God and change it all. Who says you should? If you can't handle the environment, you leave it. And if you have the luxury to leave the Ukraine, I'm sure you would. And if you can't, then you learn to deal with it. And you know, like the Tibetans, you know why it's happening. So you own it and you take responsibility, and you know your past actions created this suffering or created the happiness, whichever one it is. You own responsibility for each one. That's the wisdom wing. And then the compassion wing is, what can I do to help? Will you help that one person who just got shot in the knee in Ukraine? You help them walk across the street. You can't magically make the world a better place. That's just fantasy and romantic. Are we communicating a little bit?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much. Oh, good. Okay. Good. Okay. Who's there? Come on, Su Young, talk to me again.
Thank you, Robina. You know, as I said, my mind is rather scattered these days. So I'm not sure
I'd
what
like
my
you to
question.
stop right there. Can you please tell me something else about your damn mind? Tell me a few good qualities, please. I want to hear them because they're all there right next to you, scattered. You've also got good qualities, but you're giving too much power to your scattered. Who cares? You're scattered. Join the universe. Tell me your good qualities, please. I want to hear them because you need to hear them.
I just finished this wonderful book.
Excuse me, answer my question. What are your good qualities? You just ignored me. You didn't even hear my question.
Sorry,
What are
my
your
good qualities.
What are some of the tendencies in your mind right now that are good and virtuous?
I'm very curious and I like to learn.
Good. What else is good about you? You kind?
Sometimes.
You're generous?
sometimes.
Okay, then you're also scattered sometimes. But you said, I am scattered, like total definition. Oh, but I'm only kind sometimes. Because we all, ironically, the irony of ego is we focus on the bad and we make it the whole the picture. Don't exaggerate your badness. So you've got a scattered mind. Honey, child, join the universe. But you've got kindness and compassion and intelligence, and you're using it every day. So focus on that, please. Are we communicating?
Okay. Thank you.
Are we communicating,
Yes, thank you.
dear?
So, can I tell you?
What?
Can I tell you?
Tell
Can I
me
tell you? Oh shoot! No, I was gonna ask you. So I just finished this book that it was very, very moving to read.
Good.
It's called Eating the Buddha by Barbara Demick.
Okay, what's about
And
the point? Eating the Buddha. for
she-
God.
Sorry.
What do you mean eating the Buddha? Come to the point.
Yeah, I know it's an interesting title, but basically the book is about this Tibetan town in Sichuan, China, called Naba,
Okay, good.
and the town was famous about 10 years ago for a series of self-immolations.
Okay,
You know, a lot of.
So cut to the chase, please. What's the point?
I guess my question is you know, because you're talking about attachment to the self,
Yeah.
and I was thinking, I
What's
was
your
wondering.
question, honey child? What's your question?
The question is, when someone thinks of suicide or commits suicide, is it because they're being selfish?
Of course it is. But we're all selfish. We're all selfish if we think too much about ourselves. Join the universe. That's why we suffer. Don't see it as a criticism. It's why we suffer. It's why we suffer. So if somebody, maybe a person could be a bodhisattva if they annihilate them, burn themselves. They could be a highly evolved being. But if you're running down the street screaming in agony, I doubt that you are, because, you know, I mean, so yeah, of course. But I mean, don't think like that. Don't worry about that. Please don't worry about that. Just focus on your good qualities, please. And who cares you're scattered? I don't care. Okay. Next person. Come on. Fernando, did he put his hand up? No? You didn't. Okay. What else?
No, I'm sorry. It's just that I'm translating. So, and I
Okay.
gesticulate a lot.
You are, and you're Spanish, and you're very kind. So people, what else is there? It's now time to go home. It's 9 o'clock. Good enough. All right, people, enough for tonight. So the next class is when? Coming when? January, and it's the daytime, isn't it? It's a daytime class, isn't it?
No, we start Monday.
It's a nighttime.
And then.
Which Monday is it? When's the next? What Monday is it?
I believe it's the 9th.
The which one? 9th of January, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm coming on every one Monday evening a month and one Wednesday morning, one Wednesday afternoon a month, I'll tell you. And then we'll see what happens after that. Okay,
Thank you.
yeah,
Please stay.
good.
Also, everyone, tomorrow is Grandma Robina's birthday.
Oh, I know, I'm 78 tomorrow.
No.
Yay.
I know, I am 78 tomorrow. It's very funny, isn't it? It's hilarious. When you say you're 78, you're looking somewhere else, you know? Who's 78? What? Because we all feel about 15, don't we? Curious. And
Maybe 30.
maybe 30. There you go. Okay. Still alive, still kicking, still acting like I'm 15 years old. So okay.
What are
people.
you going to do to celebrate Venerable
Well,
Robina?
one lady from, where is she? She's not here tonight. Is she? Brenda, are you there tonight, Brenda? Brenda, she lives in Connecticut, I think. She's two of her friends, three of them are inviting me out for dinner. I don't know who they are. I don't know who the friends are, but they're taking me out for dinner. So I wear my,
Very nice.
I've got a special party jacket that I wear sometimes. So I wear my special party jacket tomorrow. I'll report back when I all see you. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
John
Happy birthday.
Oh,
Happy
birthday.
holiday.
Ke panam, ke gyuchi, ke panyam pa me payam, gongne gondu pabashog, gewa din yududag, lama sange drugyone droatikang, malupa de sala, gopashog. And what that says basically is may compassion grow and grow, and all the seeds we've planted, every thought we've had, may they ripen in the future in the development of our own amazing potential for our sake and the sake of others. And then don't give up, just persevere. What's your name?
Jess,
Jess. Keep moving, Jess.
thank you.
Okay,
I'll try.
keep moving. Oh, you got no choice. Okay, people, goodbye. See you next time.
Okay.
Thank you, Robin.
Happy birthday,
Thank you.
Robin.